Sweet, here we go, guys. I know that's my kind of go-to entrance into every single exam is, hey guys, but hello everyone. Maybe that's how we'll start from now on. Hello everyone. We are going through core activity day today, and this is going to be core day 1. And I want to start out just because I feel like these movements are so beneficial. I want to start out with the McGill 3. So we're just going to do a quick recap on those. And we'll start out with our bird dogs. So coming through here, I'll just go square to you guys. And it's opposite limbs. Pause on the top. And what I'm doing at the top there is I'm trying to pull this shoulder blade down into my spine and make it nice and tight up into the spine. And on this leg that's kicking out and back, is I'm just trying to squeeze that glute, get that booty firing. And you can pause at the top, and you can do it for reps or you can do it for breaths. You can do all your reps on one side or you can do alternating reps. For me, I find that I prefer to do either all of my reps on one side. That way I can kind of be strict at the top, and I can get lazy as I relax out, as opposed to having to reset each time. And just resetting each time kind of grinds your knees up a little bit too. So I'll usually stick to one side and do all my reps on one side. That tension that you're actually getting something beneficial out of it, that tension that with enough tension to actually cause some fatigue and muscle activation, it's kind of really only occurring at the top. So it may not be beneficial to come up and to fully relax and drop. I feel like I get a little bit more out of kind of living at the top and refiring up there. And again, reps are great. I'm on a little bit of a kick where I'm using a lot of my breathing patterns. So for me, I think that you're going to get benefits out of both of those. See McGill 3. So we did our bird dog variation. For that side plank, McGill teaches the side plank with the top foot out front and the top hand on the bottom shoulder. And what that's going to do is that's going to pull you forward and just rotate you just a little bit. And I feel a real difference on it. So if you're always stacking the feet and maybe going hand on hip, there's some other good variations. There's all kinds of stuff that you can do. You can do reps. You can rotate in and out. Those are all great. But if you want to do it like Dr. McGill suggests, you're going to have that top foot slid out front and that top hand on the bottom shoulder. And then what's our third variation, or our third movement of that McGill 3? We're going to go hands underneath that lumbar spine, because our spine has a natural S-curve to it. And this will allow us to crunch and maintain our S-curve in the spine. And as I come up, one thing that's really common to do is to dig the elbows in. You end up leaning on your elbows and not getting a whole lot of this in the abdomen. And so what I suggest doing is that as you crunch up, wing those elbows forward, get them up off the ground. And what you're going to do is try and pinch your rib down to your pelvis. So that bottom rib, that top notch of your pelvis there is called your ASIS, your anterior superior iliac crest. And so if you want to do reps, it's a breath in, hold that breath, crunch up, make your stomach as small as you can, slow exhale out, keep exhaling. As you keep exhaling, you're shrinking down your belly even more. Those muscles in the abdomen are going to get a bigger contraction. And that kind of leads us into our next conversation about breathing. We'll get there in just a second. We're just going to do a couple more reps here. And one rep on the other side. Now, with the reps on this, you're you're kind of stuck in that activation zone. You're not really going to do them for power or for strength necessarily, but you're more trying to get them activated and essentially just warmed up so that they can handle stressors on bigger loads. Now, if you're doing, let's say your back is really messed up, or you're really concerned about it, and you want to put in some extra work, then I would add in reps and sets. But in general, what I would do for maybe some warm-up work on these, you got 3 movements, our bird dogs. I would probably do something like 20 reps per side, or 10 breaths per side, or 20 seconds per side. If you want to crank that up a notch and spend more time on it, you know, the sky's the limit. But at some point, you're probably not getting a whole lot of it. Like, I wouldn't do 100 reps per set on each side, not necessarily, but that's an option if you want to just do something outside the norm to try to spark some growth. That's not illegal or anything like that, so it's an option. So bird dogs, yeah, probably about 20 reps per side, 10 breaths per side is pretty good. And then on that side plank, if you're just going to be still with it, which is totally fine, with that side plank, I find that like 20 to 40 seconds is probably the sweet spot. So any less than 20 seconds, I'd be concerned that you're not getting enough out of it. And anything more than 40 seconds, I'd say you might be beating a dead horse, or maybe you hardly ever do it further. Maybe you hardly ever do the side plank for longer than 40 seconds, and that's exactly what you need to do. Maybe you need to mix it up and just throw a wrench in the works. And then with our offset crunches with the breathing, if those are done properly, so it's a big inhale at the bottom, hold that inhale, hold that air, you're going to crunch up, and with that crunch, you're going to hold and you're going to do a long exhale. In fact, that exhale is going to be so long that you're going to be trying to squeeze in your abdominal muscles and try to make your waistline small and all that good stuff. As you're doing that, you almost kind of run out of air and get a little lightheaded. So you're going to want to relax and lay back. And you're not going to want to do that too many reps in a row, because then you start just getting lightheaded over and over and over again. So really, for me, if I'm doing that approach to the offset crunch, I'm probably going to do about 5 reps per side, just to get that front wall of my abdomen very activated. So I'll do about 5 reps per side there. If I'm doing a pause at the top and breathing in and out, it seems to be that about 10 big breaths in and out there is sort of a good spot there. As far as just counting reps, well, that movement's actually really dependent on your breathing pattern. So I don't know that I would do reps away from breaths with it. Again, if you wanted to, you could, just to mix things up. But I would really personally tie my breathing patterns into that offset crunch, maybe more so than a lot of other movements. So let's talk about mobility here. We've talked about the joint by joint approach. We've talked about lower cross syndrome. And what that really tells us is that we need mobile hips, we need a stable lumbar spine, we need a mobile thoracic spine, and a stable cervical spine. So I'll throw a couple of ideas at you today that sort of help with specifically that lower cross syndrome and maybe that anterior pelvic tilt that tends to happen with a lot of sedentary lifestyle, sitting on the couch too much, and maybe you have a long commute to work and you're a student, and so you end up sitting in classes a lot, and just the list goes on why those hip flexors might tighten up and why we might need to open up the front with open up our front hip flexors and that psoas major. We'll talk about that in a second here, in order to reduce lower back pain. So again, a lot of times we're hurting on the lower back. It's not because our lower back is overworked, but more often it's because the front of our hips are super tight, and that gets tight. Remember that bowl of cereal tips forward in the front, it comes up in the back, and then we get a really unhappy lower back. So here's just a couple of ideas on how to keep us feeling good and stay mobile through the hips and the back. So starting out, this has been popularized well, as far as I know, been popularized to me by way of Dr. Kelly Starrett. That's going to be the couch stretch. Nice. You guys even have a little double angle here on the mirror. But all I'm really hoping for is to get the top of my quads, because you have quads, 4 of those quads, there's 4 muscles in the quads, and 2 of those muscles are going to jump over your pelvis and act as a flexor on your hip as well. So they're going to be knee extensors, and then 2 of those are going to act as hip flexors. And then we've got another muscle that doesn't have anything to do with the knee action called the psoas major. And that psoas major comes from, let's see, I think it's L3. I think it comes from our 3rd lumbar vertebrae, and it jumps out over our pelvis, in front of our pelvis, and then comes in to reattach on the top of our femur. And that helps us with hip flexion as well. And we're going to hold that about 2 minutes per side, by recommendation of Dr. Kelly Starrett, as well as a couple other personalities in the field that spend more time talking about flexibility and mobility. It seems like if you want tissues to change in length, you're probably going to hold stretches for about 2 minutes per time. So that psoas major right in here, you might get a little bit of stretch here, so you can go for just a big knee bend, and you can hike your hips back, and you're probably going to get some quad stretch there. But if you're going to squeeze that glute and drive your hips forward, that's going to help open up the front of that hip and get way more into those hip flexors. And while you're in here, to do some deep breathing is not a bad idea, because you're stretching it biomechanically just through the articulation of this joint and how we're holding the body. But some deep breaths from the inside, letting those lungs kind of push against the tissues from the inside out, also not a bad idea. And however long that is, let's say that was 2 minutes, so we'd move on. And depending on how much trouble you're having with the lower back, I'd maybe revisit that stretch a couple times a day, each time doing it a couple of times. And then to get our psoas major, that's that little muscle we were talking about that just jumps out from your lower back over your pelvis and attaches to the femur. You can do a few different things. You can self-manipulate, so to go in somewhere, if my AS/IS is here and my belly button's here, somewhere in between there, yep, there's mine. You can go in and you can start manipulating, and you can massage, and you kind of know you're on the right spot when you get like this weird pukey / almost need to go to the bathroom, kind of just a funky feeling. But that psoas major goes in there, and that can tighten up from things like too much sitting and the regular hip flexor ailments that we already talked about, especially associated with lower cross syndrome. But it's a weird one because it can also tighten up from eating foods that are poor choices for us, because that digestive stress, apparently it can actually jump over a little bit and cause inflammation in that psoas major. So digestive stress, in the yoga world, they'll call the psoas major the muscle of the soul. And essentially, as I looked into it, what I found is that they thought that there's a theory, again, this is all just theory. The theory is that psoas major plays a factor in our ability to fight or flight. So if a grizzly bear is going to attack us, we're probably going to curl up in a fetal position on the ground and protect all of our vital organs. You got the throat, all the vital organs in here, genitals down there that you're trying to protect so that you can pass along your genetic traits to another generation. And so over the years, over the millennia of being attacked by saber-toothed tigers, by enemies, by whatever it is, the theory is that we learned to tighten up in a ball and stay safe against impending threats. But in our modern world, There's not saber-toothed tigers. Not many people are getting attacked by bears, but we do get a lot of text messages and a lot of constant stimulation and deadlines and homework assignments and everything like that. So we are in a little bit of a stressful or stimulating environment. And so the theory there is that maybe some of that mental stress, maybe digestive stress from eating low quality foods, maybe the biomechanical stress from sitting down for long periods of time. So we're doing a lot of things that are unnatural. And if you kind of want to have like a crunchy or hippy dippy kind of approach to it, that means that our hip flexors and our psoas major are probably going to tighten up a little bit more than usual. And we already talked about the transformation of the breathing pattern in the modern society. Well, when we breathe into the belly, that is also another way that psoas major may get some stretching. So when we're breathing up here and we're sitting a lot and we're eating crummy foods, it's understandable that psoas major might tighten up a little bit extra. And because of that, we get basically a domino effect where in our back, we get back pain. So I know that's a nice little tangent there, going off the beaten path, and it's kind of crunchy or, kind of woo-woo, hippie, but whatever, the science is there, it's pretty solid. But when we want to get to that psoas major, that's one that's a little bit harder to just stretch out. So a lot of times you have to get more hands-on. So we already did the hand manipulation, kind of digging into your gut there. Well, you can do a very similar approach. And actually I just put, I found that just instantly this time, just right on there. And I haven't been doing this lately, so I can feel it really well. It's like clear as day to me that I'm on the right spot. But this would be referred to as mashing. And you can do it with a kettlebell, a dumbbell. I might put my fist under there. I might put a lacrosse ball under the weight, just to help me get, better attack that. Just to better attack that tissue. But the psoas major, you've got one on each side. I only did my right side today. But if you've got lower back pain, or if you're just interested in kind of figuring out a little bit more about what's going on with your core, I would advise just digging in that area a little bit and just seeing if you can get any of that strange sensation that comes with finding a tight psoas major. And honestly, this would be another thing on the list of things that I wish I would have known sooner in my career as a fitness professional. So play around with that a little bit, guys. Whether it's just prodding your own belly, using tools and implements like kettlebells, dumbbells, lacrosse balls, do some deep breathing with that. And if you've got a workout partner or an athlete or a boyfriend or girlfriend, maybe just have them lay on their back and see if you can find, or just stand up actually, and just see if you can find theirs and maybe feel it, and just warm ahead of time, not to slap you upside the head, because once you find it, if it's really tight, it's going to hurt and it's going to feel kind of that weird feeling where you don't know whether you're getting tickled or you're about to throw up. So it gives you something to look into. Okay, so let's remember that Bretzel again with our core. We need that thoracic spine to be mobile, and our Bretzel. Let me scoot on camera here. And those Bretzels are going to help us in that pursuit of a mobile thoracic spine. My top leg is out front. I keep that knee pinned to the ground. Bottom leg is out back. My head is relaxed, whether it's on the ground or up on a surface, pillow, foam roll, whatever. Again, I've got a long neck and a big head, so I can lay my noggin down on the ground, no problem. But a lot of people, it's not comfortable. And you're going to tie your breathing in again with this movement. Big breath in when you're facing square forward. Slow exhale as you pivot back. And no problem. And again, you could go back and do about a 2-minute hold. But really what you're going to do while you're doing that pretzel is you're going to feel where there's tightness. And for most people, it's in the quad and hip flexor. So I would do that pretzel a handful of reps per side to help mobilize that spine. And then when it's the appropriate time in your training or away from your training, I would do some couch stretches to stretch my quad or hip flexor or both to better increase my range of motion within that pretzel, right? So it's just like our strength training. When we find a weakness in our strength training, we're going to go in and we're going to smash and pick on and strengthen that weak link. And then our big movements are going to get stronger and we'll have a new weak link. So the pretzel is kind of like a big compound movement like that. You'll be able to find some weak links or some tight areas, and then you'll go give them extra TLC and time and attention, and you lengthen those and make those tissues happier, and then come back and do some more pretzels. So yeah, it's not rocket science, but it does take some time to kind of put all the pieces together. Okay, still working on our spine mobility. Remember the cat and cow? Nice easy one. Also going to be paired to breathing. Big breath in at the bottom. Big breath out at the top. And we've got more spinal flexion and extension. We've got the cobra. You can pair some breaths with that. Big deep breaths in there. And back to child's pose. Yeah, big deep breaths. All right, so breathing. Yeah, let's talk a little about breathing. I gotta go grab a balloon. I'll be right back. All right, here we go. I knew I forgot something, but little balloon, little birthday balloon there. And I'll tell you guys, when I get to spend time with the Arizona Diamondbacks as a observer / helper, so kind of an intern in the weight room. And this is in the summer of 2014. And the first time I walk into the building, the way you get to the weight room, you actually cut through the athletic training room. And as I'm going through there, there's about a dozen guys in the athletic training room receiving care. And at the time that I come in there, as I'm just walking through, I'm just looking around. And out of about 12 guys that were receiving care, about 9 of them had a balloon and were working on blowing up that balloon in different postures and positions. And I had seen and heard about that a little bit before, but to see that a Major League Baseball team with these $1 million athletes was so on board and jumping into this and had all of their big shot athletes using balloon breathing to enhance their performance and reduce their injuries and help them heal. That was like, turning on a light bulb right over my head that, hey, okay, maybe this stuff is pretty important. Maybe this stuff is worth doing. And the reason that the balloon can be so beneficial is it's going to reinforce belly breathing and pressure within the jaw and the throat. So if you have a balloon, go grab it, use it, hit some breaths. I'm going to fill this one up once or twice and just talk about it a little bit. If you don't, put it on your shopping list for the next time you have a party, and you can open up the package early and take one out and play around with it a little bit. But not a bad way to kind of grow and reinforce the breathing patterns into the belly. So I'll go kind of a profile view here, see if we can't get my belly moving a little bit here. Yeah. So you'll notice the more you breathe air in your belly through the nose, because the balloon, you can't breathe because the balloon's in your mouth. So you're reinforcing the breathing pattern in through the nose, and you're going to want to pull that air down into your belly, because it's very instinctual and very intuitive that once the air is down in the belly, that you can flex your belly in to get that air out of your mouth better. Whereas pulling it up into the chest, it doesn't flow as well. There's nothing to really compress. That makes sense for inhaling, but to exhale from air that's up in your chest cavity, it just doesn't come out as well. So that belly breathing is just more intuitive, and it's just simpler with a balloon. So I'll do one more, but I think you guys get the picture. Yeah, so every time I'm exhaling, I'm basically just flexing my abs. I'm gonna keep my shirt on because it's not that kind of video, but every time I exhale, I'm basically just tightening up down here, and that makes it so much easier to blow up this balloon than versus trying to like compress your chest, which is just, you got your chest plate and your ribs, and it just, yes, it extends to inhale, but then you basically have to wait for gravity to help it exhale. There's not really that same natural exhalation factor as comes with the diaphragm and the abdomen. So that's enough with the balloon, but honestly, I would encourage you all to try that out. But if you don't have a balloon, but you still want to teach yourself or others how to breathe well, try some on back belly breaths. And what we're going to do here is go one hand on the chest, one hand on the belly. And again, we're looking for breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. And the reason your hands are on your chest and on your belly is to give us feedback on whether or not we're breathing into our chest. And for our purposes, we don't want to breathe in our chest. We want to breathe big old belly breaths. And then as we exhale out, that belly shrinks down. So on the inhale, belly button to sky. And on that exhale, belly button to basement. Back down to your spine. And what you can do is you can start people off in this position, and you'll notice that a lot of people will really struggle to take any kind of reasonably sized breath without it filling up their chest. And it's kind of funny to watch them struggle and to watch them get frustrated, and you have to kind of talk them out of it and just say, hey, just kick out a couple of breaths and retry and start taking small breaths and build up as you go. And then a couple minutes later, they can breathe into their belly as big and as full as they want to, and they have no problem keeping that chest down. And so that's probably another big sort of like epiphany or eye opener is getting people to be able to inhale into their belly and exhale without that chest moving. So the majority of people, from what I've seen, their chest is moving on the first handful of reps, and then it just goes away and they sort of figure it out. And then the goal would be to get them performing that type of breathing basically all the time, not just laying down on their back, but while they're up on their feet running, while they're on a mat wrestling or fighting. And so, that's like the ground level introduction to it, but you can take that to any level that you want to, and it seems to be applicable in basically all aspects of life and sport. So not to mention that if you've got weight loss clients, this breathing stuff, kind of like we talked about in our core foundations lecture discussion, this breathing stuff can actually help us reduce our stress levels. It can help bring us into a parasympathetic state. And when our stress levels get reduced, we produce less cortisol, and cortisol helps us store fat. It promotes fat storage. So if you have just a general client who wants to lose some weight, they don't really care, they don't want to squat 500 pounds, they don't want to hit home runs, they just want to be leaner. Well, this breathing stuff can be great for that because you're going to get them healthier. You're going to help reduce lower back pain. Remember, lower back pain is the number 2 reason people are going to the doctor in the United States. But with breathing like that, where you're lowering their stress levels, lower stress levels are a great way to optimize our hormone levels and boost our health. So I think that this breathing stuff is for everybody. I'd play around with it, myself, and I would start experimenting on other people. So we've got on back belly breaths. We've got alligator breathing, which is the same approach, and all you're gonna do is lay your head down you're gonna lay down, belly down, with your head on your forearms. And as you're taking in those big old belly breaths, it's going to reinforce belly breathing, and it's also going to allow for some spinal decompression. And so on this one, you can tell people to breathe in their belly, but what they're really going to do is breathe into their lower back. And you can use that for teaching abdominal breathing, for a cool down at the end of a lift, or if someone's lower back has just been irritated or they're hurting, you can tell them to lay down. That way the body gets to relax, but you can reinforce that breathing pattern, and you can decompress the spine with every breath. So that's not a bad tool either. That's alligator breathing. How about stimulus breathing? If I've got a football player who's about to go back on the field, I encourage them to purposefully breathe at a little bit of a faster rate, not necessarily hyperventilate, and to breathe into their chest, because that's going to take them from any parasympathetic state that they have to drive them into a sympathetic state, because when they go onto the field, they're probably essentially going to be hand fighting with other individuals. So that's stimulating. Also, same thing in the weight room before lifting a big weight. So there's use for that as well, because we can take ourselves into a really sympathetic state. We can get ourselves really worked up, but we can also calm ourselves down. And how do we calm ourselves down? Well, that belly breathing, nice and slow, it's going to trigger and stimulate our vagus nerve. And that vagus nerve is going to be a direct line from the base of our abdomen and our lungs up to our brain, and it's like pushing the calm down button, basically. And so if you or anybody you know has trouble sleeping, what you can do is you can teach them how to box breathe, or to do some deep breathing patterns to help them lower their heart rate, lower their body temperature, and change their nervous system, their autonomic nervous system, to more of a parasympathetic state. And so what I'll do is I'll do this box breathing. Call it box breathing because it's 4 seconds in, 4 second hold, 4 seconds out, 4 second hold, 4 seconds in, 4 second hold, 4 seconds out, 4 seconds hold. And you just repeat that. And from the literature, basically the longer you hold it, the longer these breaths become, the bigger that box becomes. If it starts out as like 2 seconds, and then goes to 3 seconds, and then goes to 5 seconds, the longer that becomes, apparently the more parasympathetic we become. We don't necessarily want to turn it into a breath holding competition though, because that causes too much distraction, and you start pushing yourself, and it, almost becoming like competitive kind of. So I would say the furthest I would go with timing inhales and exhales is about 7 or 8 seconds. And if I do a 7 or 8 second breath in, I'm probably not going to hold for 7 or 8 seconds on both. It's probably going to be box breathing. At that point, it'll probably be 7 or 8 seconds in, a 1 or 2 second pause, and 7 or 8 seconds out. So you have different theories and different approaches on this parasympathetic style breathing. You can also do a 2-to-1 ratio where however long you breathe in, you double it and you breathe out twice as long. So if I breathe in for 2 seconds, I exhale for 4 seconds. And the goal here is to just get the body to be very still and to get the mind to calm down. So it's practicing mindfulness at the same time that you're practicing this breathing. And it can be a great trick for falling asleep at night, whether you're going to sleep for the first time or if you wake up in the middle of the night and are trying to go back to sleep. So that longer breathing style is excellent and works for a lot of people for that breath for sleeping. And that box breathing is actually something they teach combatants in war to perform in the middle of firefights to help them stay calm and stay centered. And that breathing stuff, this is the end of the breathing spiel. You can do it, you can associate it with all of your core work and all of your lifting and all of your running. That oxygen exchange that's so important is only just a part of it, but it's the muscular activity. Remember, fighters and baseball players, if they breathe and contract their abdomen at the right time, they can actually strengthen their core and produce more power. Same thing with heavy lifts and big jumps. Our ability to breathe and breathe properly has been totally underrated, but it's coming. It's kind of bubbling up and becoming more popular over the last couple of years. And honestly, I've probably only been aware of it for the last 4 or 5 years, and it never crossed my mind besides anything being like anything more than that's a real kind of hippie woo-woo, like everybody knows how to breathe, who cares? So before that, I was never really worried about it, except for maybe Valsalva breathing and the Valsalva maneuver for lifting heavier weights. But there's a lot to it. All right, so I want to finish today. Well, let's talk about some typical core work. Okay, so we've all done crunches, right? We've done the crossover legs crunches. We've done the toe touch crunches. We've done those crunches. We've reached back. You get tired, and you're basically just like being like a horizontal bobblehead and just doing neck crunches, right? So why is that bad? It's not terrible, but it's not necessarily good. So is it productive? Yeah, you're probably going to develop a little bit of muscle mass. You do enough crunches, you're definitely going to burn in the belly, and that leads us to believe that you're going to grow some muscle mass and have hopefully a better six-pack one day. But is it applicable to sport? Not as much. There's not too many sports where you are creating flexion over and over again. And you're taking your spine, you're intentionally removing your spine from more of a neutral position, and you're leaving that neutral position in order to do anything. I just don't think that that's very sport practical. And just for health, not great for the spine. You don't want to flex that spine over and over again in that acute fashion. In fact, if we look at our Stuart McGill resources, the research that they're doing shows that that's leading to disc herniations, and that's not what we want. That's for something that's not really giving us a whole lot of bonus or rewards. We don't really want to risk our spine health. And then probably the last reason why we don't love crunches is it's a lot of times we're not actually using our abdomen. We actually kind of compensate, and we're just kind of like head banging and doing a lot of neck exercises, and that's not what we're looking for either. So they're not really giving us a whole lot, but they've got some risks associated with them. So they kind of scare me off a little bit. Now the exception would be the McGill crunch. So again, we're bracing that lumbar spine, so we're not going to get that acute spinal flexion. Everything is under control. There's tension on the muscles, not so much stress on the joints. And because this is such a breath-oriented movement, it's really reinforcing proper breathing patterns.
Big deep breaths in there. Again, you can breathe with the motion, or you can just stay at the top and do a combination of tightening up your abdomen while breathing in, which makes for sort of an interesting, like counterintuitive challenge. So in the Go Crunch, I would make that my go-to crunch. Doesn't mean you can't ever do toe touch crunches or whatever it is, bicycle crunches, but I would just sprinkle those in. I would make those a side dish or kind of like the occasional dessert versus the bulk of my work. And what I'll do a lot of times with my athletes is I know that crunches are possibly a bad exercise, or at least they're not what I want to do over and over again as my like go-to core exercise. So what I'll do is, sometimes you have to sell your program and your beliefs. Is I won't just say, oh, crunches are stupid, crunches are bad, but I'll slowly build in extra core stability movements and movements that I believe are going to be more beneficial. And I'll kind of talk a little bit about, oh man, those crunches really burn. And then I'll maybe educate them on just a little bit why, okay, maybe those crunches aren't the best. Okay, maybe they're not even that good. Okay, maybe we should only just do them every once in a while. And then maybe one day we just get rid of them altogether. Maybe. Even with what I know, I still sprinkle them in there every once in a while because I still like getting a belly burn too. I'm still trying to convince myself that I'm going to have a 12-pack one day. So that's my take on crunches. As far as sit-ups go, you get a lot of the same problems with the spine. And you're also you tend to just get a lot of hip flexor activation. And this is not a very athletic exercise. There's not a lot going on here that's going to transfer onto a sporting field. So the sit-up becomes sort of questionable here as well. I would say there's two variations of the sit-up that I would encourage you to do. One would be a weighted sit-up, maybe toes under an item or having a partner hold your toes down. Well, let's say we get a weighted sit-up and we want to go pretty heavy. Well, what we can do is get that weighted sit-up in and just kind of get the concentric part done, and then that eccentric part, maintaining a very stable spine, taking our time, we can slowly go back. So you can work some breath work in there, and you can also create a big emphasis on muscle contraction and the quality of muscle activation. So instead of it just being an unnecessary spinal flexion exercise over and over and over again, you can actually sort of add some tension to the muscles in that manner. And by going nice and slow, you're increasing your amount of time under tension on the muscles compared to how much spinal flexion you have to take on. So that's one variation that's kind of a good go-to. And this one is rarely done, but it's almost like it's kind of like a party trick, but this sucker works pretty well. So you could have a partner, if I'm in this sit-up position, I could have a partner, sort of kneeling or half crouching facing me, and their hands would be on the back of my calves, and they'd be pulling me towards them. And the goal would be to keep my heels on the ground and to keep my glutes and hamstrings firing. So since I don't have a partner, we're going to kind of make do with this little setup right here. So got some tension on there. Again, my challenge is to keep my heels on the ground and my glutes and my hamstrings tight. And when I'm firing that glutes and the hamstrings like that, there is a reflex where the hip flexors relax. And so I'm going to take my hip flexors out of the equation for the sit-up. Oh man, it's so hard. And I had to cheat to get up there. But what you can do, and I'm still not from Coach Pavel Satsouline,
and that sucker is just a tough movement. But it's a sit-up without quads and hip flexors, and sometimes you just got to take a couple of tries to actually get your abdomen warmed up. Oh man, I can't even get up there today. All right, I'm gonna cheat one more. Yeah, even that with a little bit of cheating and head rocking, that thing just automatically, it's like a punch in the gut. And Pavel says that, so for sit-ups, normally we do sets of like 25 or 50 or whatever. For that, a set of about 5 is good. And for me, today, I'm not gonna film myself failing a few more times. But yeah, it usually takes me a handful of efforts to get it done. And today I didn't even get one good one in the first 3 tries or so. And then, all right, here's the last part for the day. We're gonna talk about planks. Everybody does them. Why do they do them? I know why I wanna do them. I wanna do them because they reinforce a braced spine and a neutral spine. It's an opportunity for us to tighten up the belly, tighten up the glutes, and fire our lats. Why do other people do them? I think just because they're popular, but a lot of times we'll kind of do, a lot of times people will get in here and their butt is up in the air or their butt is sinking. Well, we don't want that. We want a neutral spine and we want to be active. Yes, there are people that can go in and hold planks for 10 minutes. I think some guy did one for like 10 hours. Some like 62-year-old Marine did a 10-hour plank last month or 2 months ago, something like that. But for us, when we're doing planks, we want to go in there and we want to be active. We want to get those muscles firing and we want to challenge ourselves. In fact, I would say that planks should really be done. Now you can go for 2 minutes here and there, but your average plank is probably only needs to be about 30 seconds. Because when you're in there and you're tightening up as much as possible, you're going to start shaking, and those muscles are going to fatigue quickly. So just coming in here, and I've got my hands down on the ground, kind of pulling the ground back towards me. My elbows are dug back. That gets my lats firing. My booty's tight, my glutes are firing, and my belly's tight. I'm flexing my six-pack as if someone was going to come in and kick me in the belly, and I'm shaking. And a plank like that should last for about 30 seconds. Occasionally go for a longer one, but we don't want to just go up and hold that position just to hold that position. We want to go in and be active, because when we're performing in sport, we need to be able to cultivate a well-organized spine and a neutral spine, and to protect our own core and structure. So practicing it here will later translate to performing it on our feet and in a dynamic environment. But if you can't even do it like that, how well are you going to stabilize your spine in a dynamic environment or in the real world? So I'll do one more variation. And that's just going to be up on a bench. And I watch people do bench planks for a long time, and I just kind of roll my eyes. Now it makes sense, in my eyes it was making sense if there was an older individual or a heavier individual, but I saw people putting healthy, lean, young people on incline planks. And until I tried it, I kind of just thought it was stupid. But on the incline plank, it changes the angles of force, and I think it gives us an opportunity to reduce the stress on our shoulders, because a lot of the planking, that's kind of what it is people's shoulders will hurt. So if someone's having shoulder pain, I would say pump them up here. But honestly, with the way the angle is on your body, I feel like I am better able to activate my lats, my abdomen, and my glutes. So it's the same principle right here, and I'm doing all the same things. And what you're really trying to do, now I'm going to cheat here to do it, what you're really trying to do is you're pulling that bench back towards you, almost as if it was going to kind of pop a ruler like that. And when I'm in there, that little change on the angle hits my belly so much harder. So I encourage you guys to try that as well. And that's all we've got for today. That's core day 1. And we'll see you again soon for core day 2.